Imagine waking up one morning to the news that your child's school is closing, indefinitely. No warning, no clear explanation. What happens to their education? Their future? This isn't just a localized issue, it's a national shockwave. Across the US, schools are shutting their doors faster than most of us can process. But why? And more importantly, what does this mean for the next generation? Let's unravel this hidden crisis together. Now, let's be real, most of us might joke that kids would be thrilled about no school. More Fortnite, less algebra, right? But this isn't about snow days or extended summer vacations. This is about a disruption so deep it could redefine what education in America looks like. The reasons behind these closures? Well, it's not as simple as blaming budget cuts or declining enrollments, though those are part of the puzzle. What we're seeing is a perfect storm. A collision of economic challenges, shifting demographics, and even, believe it or not, pandemic aftershocks. And here's where the fear factor kicks in. Some experts warn this could spell disaster for millions of kids. Imagine a generation falling behind not because they lack talent or ambition, but because their schools simply cease to exist. Speaking of disaster, remember that time you tried to teach your kid long division during lockdown? Yeah, fun times. But jokes aside, parents are now facing the real prospect of becoming full-time teachers if closures continue. Are you ready for that? Didn't think so. But wait, there's more to this story than just numbers and headlines. What's really fueling this crisis? And how are communities scrambling to adapt? Stick around, because in the next section, we'll uncover the forces pulling the strings behind these closures, and the surprising ways some schools are fighting back. We've set the stage, schools are closing at an alarming rate, leaving families scrambling and communities reeling. But why is this happening? What's driving this crisis? It's time to peel back the layers and expose the hidden forces at play. Let's start with the obvious elephant in the room, money. Schools, especially public ones, depend on funding tied to enrollment numbers. But here's the kicker, student populations in some areas are plummeting. Families are moving to cities with better job prospects, while rural and suburban schools struggle to fill classrooms. And then there's the fallout from the pandemic. Remember those remote learning days we all tried to forget? Well, they left lasting scars. Enrollment in some districts never bounced back, with thousands of students either opting for homeschooling, private institutions, or dropping off the radar altogether. When students vanish, so does the funding. But that's not the whole story. The economic landscape is shifting in ways schools can't control. Inflation is skyrocketing, and school budgets are stretched thin. Imagine trying to run a school while balancing the rising costs of utilities, transportation, and teacher salaries. Spoiler alert, it doesn't add up. And let's not forget the human element. Picture this, a teacher who has dedicated 20 years of their life to shaping young minds, suddenly out of a job because their school was forced to shut down. Communities lose more than just a building, they lose a hub of connection, learning, and hope. For parents, it's even more heartbreaking. How do you explain to your child that their beloved school, the place where they made friends, learned, and grew, is no longer there? The emotional weight of this crisis is immense. Now, let's pause for a second. Have you ever thought about how schools fund their sports teams? It's kind of ironic, isn't it? A championship-winning football team might get more community support than the library that's literally teaching kids to read. Crazy, right? But that's the reality some schools are facing, prioritizing short-term wins over long-term learning. And then there's politics, because, of course, there is. Education policy in the US is a complex web of local, state, and federal interests, and often, it's the students who get caught in the middle. Policies like standardized testing requirements and voucher programs pull resources away from struggling public schools, exacerbating the problem. Meanwhile, charter schools and private institutions are growing in popularity, drawing funding and students from traditional public schools. This creates a feedback loop, public schools lose students, funding drops, and closures follow. It's a vicious cycle, and breaking it feels almost impossible. But here's the burning question, can anything be done to stop this trend? Are there schools finding innovative ways to survive and thrive despite these overwhelming odds? In the final section, we'll explore the fight for the future of education, and how you, yes you, might play a role in saving it. So, we've uncovered the forces behind the school closures, economic challenges, declining enrollment, and a tangled web of politics. But here's the thing, all hope isn't lost. Across the country, communities are stepping up, educators are innovating, and surprising solutions are emerging. Let's dive into the fight to save our schools, and how this crisis might just become an opportunity for transformation. First, let's talk about communities. When schools close, it's not just the students and teachers who feel the impact, it's everyone. But in many towns, neighbors are banding together to keep the doors open. From grassroots fundraising efforts to public demonstrations, people are proving that education is worth fighting for. Take, for example, a small district in Indiana. Faced with closure, parents and teachers formed a coalition to lobby for additional funding. They didn't just make noise, they made change, securing grants and partnerships that allowed the school to remain open. And then there are the educators, unsung heroes adapting to impossible situations. Some are transforming traditional classrooms into multi-use community centers, providing everything from after-school programs to adult education. Others are leveraging technology to reach students in innovative ways, offering virtual courses that keep learning alive even when schools close. But it's not just about survival, it's about reimagining what education can be. Imagine a world where schools aren't just buildings but hubs of creativity and connection. Where technology bridges the gap for underserved communities, and where every child, no matter their zip code, has access to a quality education. This isn't a pipe dream, it's happening in places like New York, where hybrid learning models are making education more flexible and accessible. Or in rural Alabama, where a school converted its gym into a community co-working space, giving parents a reason to invest in local education. But the battle isn't over yet. The future of education depends on all of us, parents, teachers, policymakers, and yes, even you. So, what will you do to ensure the next generation doesn't just survive but thrives? The clock is ticking, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Together, we can turn the tide, but only if we act now. Want to know more about how you can make a difference? Check out the resources in the description below and subscribe for more insights into the issues shaping our world.